Welcome to the Career Meets World podcast, Nick. Such an honor to have you on today. I know you're always fired up, but I got to ask, how fired up are you today?
I'm really fired up, Edward. This is awesome. I love the questions you kind of planned and just what you're doing around careers. So really excited.
Appreciate it. Like I said, we have a lot to cover today, and I want to make sure that people really understand Nick Mehta and get to the roots of how you've gone to where you are, what that entrepreneurial spirit really is inside of you, and what fuels you.
Cool.
I know oftentimes people look at what you're doing today, right? CEO of Gainsight, hyper exciting, one of the fastest growing customer success platforms out there. But I doubt that's what really inspired you early on in your days. What did you think you were actually going to do when you were growing up?
When I was a kid, oh yeah, a lot of different. I think a lot of kids like you have just so many different ideas. My parents tell me the stories because I don't remember them all, but there was I think at some point a scientist. My dad was in business. He ran some small companies, so business was one of them at some point. Garbage man, astronaut. But the most entertaining stories I think that I did because my dad was sort of a small business person in tech, like running some really small companies. I sort of absorbed some of that. So apparently in fifth grade, I tried to start a company with some classmates, and we were doing solar powered cars. So, but they were like solar powered toy cars. So we basically took a solar cell and like strapped it onto a toy car. So that's what we were doing apparently. And I think we had some really generic like name for the company, like American Innovation Corporation or something really like just like one of those names you hear in movies. But the entertaining thing is apparently we had like, I don't know, 4 or 5 people in our company, and there was a falling out, and we had a board meeting where we fired one of our co-founders. So I fired somebody at probably 10 or 11 years old. So not my finest moment, but that's, I guess when I was a kid, I had some of these ideas in my head apparently.
That's so funny. And I appreciate you sharing that story. I'm sure it's led to kind of a lot of your rooted thinking from the past into what you're doing today. When you think about even having a board today,
Right.
how do you think about which players you put out on the court or even on the field with you?
In terms of board, yeah, I mean, I think that I love my board members. I've had a number of board members over the years, and in some ways, I just love outside in input and people pushing me. So in some ways, I'm like, bring it on. It doesn't matter who they are, and I love a challenge too. So sometimes some people can be a little bit stiffer in their external appearance, but then you get them to open up, and then they're all just human beings on the inside. But we've been really lucky to have some amazing board members. Like picking one example, Sue Barsamian is been an independent board member of Gainsight for the last about 4 years, and she's on the boards of Exactly, Box, Segment until the acquisition by Twilio, Auth0 till the acquisition by Okta. So she's like Symantec. She's been on some great boards. And the thing I love about Sue is, or couple things. Number one is she is one of those people that just knows everyone. So board members sometimes are really helpful from a networking perspective. She's helped us so much with intros and customers and references and all that. But then beyond that, like she's somebody who is very happy to push us, but in a way that it actually is very friendly and like feels supportive, right? So you can have somebody who pushes you in a way that feels critical, but she talks to my team. She shares things. She says, yeah, Nick, do you think you're moving fast enough in this area? She's hyper responsive. That's another thing I really appreciate, is people are there for you. So she's sort of my, what I'd call best board member ever. And I've been really lucky to have her for several years.
That's awesome. And I know oftentimes people talk about kind of 2 different types of boards, right? For a CEO, you have your actual board of the company,
Right.
but there's always people in your life who really support and help you and guide you. And those are your mentors. And oftentimes, especially people listening to this podcast, are folks who need advice, who are
Yeah.
looking for true mentorship. You're still at a point where you're growing and expanding. Who are some of the people in your life that really support you outside of your actual board?
Yeah, totally. So obviously, first and foremost would be my family, my wife, the kids, my parents. And so that's less about the business, but just more about me as a human being. But then after that, I would say a couple dimensions. One is I have this really, really fortunate to have a lot of peers that are CEOs and built a great peer network. And the most tangible example of that is I'm a member of YPO, which is a CEO peer group. And it's kind of a national, international organization. And they have these sort of different chapters in different areas. And so my group of what they call forum meets once a month with about 10 people, and you're completely candid with each other. You tell everyone everything, not just about work, but personal as well. And so I've been in the same forum for basically the last, gosh, it's probably almost, 13, 14 years now. And so that's an incredible group because they know me really well, and we just tell them everything and it's some ways it's just catharsis to be able to get everything off your chest. And then obviously I have some CEOs I'll go to for specific things. I'm dealing with this issue, have you done that before, et cetera. The network of people is incredibly welcoming in tech. I think not for everyone, and we need to do a better job of it, but at least at the CEO level, people are very open to helping each other, which has been really great. And then the last thing is, there's a lot of CEOs that I've never met, but I still learn a lot from, right? Reading about, a Mark Benioff or, people like that, just like, people that you're like, okay, I'm going to read their books and learn from them. Because I'm one of our values at Gainsight is Shoshin, which is a Japanese word for beginner's mind. And so we definitely, and I personally believe like I'm a beginner. Like I've been doing CEO thing for a while, but I'm still a beginner. I want to keep getting better. And I want to believe that my best days are ahead of me. So I always want to be learning.
Yeah, it's that always day one mentality. I think that Jeff Bezos instills in a lot of people. Thanks for kind of breaking down those different mentorship avenues that you go down. I know oftentimes people might be listening, might aspire to become a CEO of a company one day, or potentially even start their own business. At what point did you realize maybe you were fit or were interested in leading a company as a CEO?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's funny because I was talking to a friend of mine who's a CEO, and he actually came into our all hands yesterday, and we were just talking about this exact question. And both of us were saying, "Hey, we just wanted to be a CEO." It wasn't less about a fit thing. And by the way, I think some of that's a privilege of like obviously being a man, and like there's more role models, and we need to make this more inclusive for everyone. And sometimes people from underrepresented backgrounds don't have that same feeling of like, this is for me. So we need to open this up so everyone feels that way. But part of it, I think, is I just wanted it. And the reason I wanted it, I wish I had a more proud reason, but the reason I wanted it is two things. The positive was I was running, so I did a startup in college, and so I got a little bit of a taste of it. And then I was in a bigger company running a division of that company. And I loved running my team. I loved it, like the culture and the all hands meetings and the, getting everyone excited. And I love the people side of it. And I didn't like working in a big company where I didn't totally control that. I didn't totally control the culture or the values. And by the way, the company was great. My bosses were awesome, but I was just like not a good employee long-term. And so I believe there's a decent number of CEOs whose main reason they want to be a CEO is they're not a good employee. And, just being honest about that. But then on top of that, like that's the like, maybe the critical side of it. The positive side is people that want to like have an impact on other people's lives in some way, because people spend a lot of time at work, and it's a big part of their lives, and you have a chance as a CEO to have an impact on other people's lives. So there's a very kind of aspirational part of this, and there's a very real part of it. I think those two together tell me I want to be a CEO forever. So
makes complete sense. You just touched on something that I actually deeply respect about Gainsight, which is their value system. And you talked about Shoshin, and another one that really sticks out to me is this notion of childlike joy, and something that you consistently live through. And it's pretty evident if you were to watch a video of this through your shirt, you just enjoy and embody that mentality. What I want to understand is oftentimes company values are reflective of individual values, and hopefully you can build culture that way. How do you look at your value system today? Does it evolve over time? And how do you ensure that your company actually lives and breathes these types of values?
Yeah, so let me take each part of that. So when we launched Gainsight in 2013, basically launched with three values: golden rule, success for all, and childlike joy. So those are our three original values, and they just basic. I mean, we talked about them as a team, but I'll be honest, I think they were things that mattered to me a lot. So they were sort of very personal, and I think that's one thing where companies that are very value centric tend to have leaders that actually genuinely care about those values, like almost in their own lives outside of work. And so those three really mattered to me. But a couple of years in, we felt like they were incomplete, like they were not the whole story. I would joke to our teammates that if you heard golden rule, success for all, and childlike joy, you might think we run like a bed and breakfast or something. We were actually running like a company that eventually hoped to make money and so on. And so we added in the last two: Shoshin, beginner's mind, and then stay thirsty, my friends, which may or may not be a copy of a TV commercial. You might have seen the beer commercial. It's similar, but it was all about ambition. So we had these five values that really mattered to us, and they've been with us the whole time and really haven't changed. And they're part of everything. First presentation I do to new hires is just about the values. That's it, nothing else. my, every planning process, when we start an annual plan, we have to kind of assess where we are vis-a-vis our values. People use the terms in every single meeting, like all the time. I have a document that is my expectations of how leaders adopt the values for my leadership team. And so it's very deeply ingrained in Gainsight. And frankly, the number one, when I ask people that just joined Gainsight, what's the most positively surprising thing about our company? And always they say, well, you guys said you were into the values, but most companies really aren't. So I was a little skeptical, and you actually are. And so that matters a lot. Have they changed? No, since that we added the last two, they haven't changed. Have they evolved in spirit? The way they evolved in spirit is we focus on some more than others. So for a good example is Shoshin. So Shoshin means beginner's mind. Part of that is us being open to ideas from everywhere, right? And that means including ideas from people that aren't experts in the field, which we love. And sometimes you actually need to listen to experts too, right? It's not always just like always listen to everyone. Clearly, there's some jobs that people have been doing them for a while. And so I'd say at some points we got a little too Shoshin, right? And we had to back off a little bit and stuff like that. One way we practically institutionalize this is every year we set our strategic plan for the year. It's like on one sheet of paper, and it has our goals and it has our company purpose and our values. But then with the values, we pick a value that we really want to focus on. So for example, this year, our value of focus is what we call stay thirsty, my friends. And then there's a principle underneath that we really want to amplify. And so the principle we're focused on this year is what we call chess, not checkers. That's underneath stay thirsty, my friends. And the idea is basically, we want to be ambitious. We don't want to do it by just working all the time. We want to be really strategic, hence chess, not checkers, right? And we want to think more like playing chess, where you're thinking many moves ahead and so on. And so this idea of, okay, picking a value that we want to work out, think about your, getting healthy, right? And you want to work out your legs or your arms or whatever. We want to work out a value every year. And that's something we've been doing.
Always have that beginner's mindset and
Yeah.
really just think about how to evolve things is really impressive that you're actually able to live out those values, and your employees see that from bottom up. It doesn't matter if they're on day one or day 1000 at the company. So I commend you for that.
Thanks.
With that being said, you've always, and especially over the last year, particularly on Twitter, you've been outspoken about just everything going on, the necessity for true diversity and inclusion, and making sure that we help underrepresented communities have opportunities in the workplace. As a CEO, how do you make sure that this is really a part of the DNA going forward of Gainsight, and really help lift people up, help other people from other communities get jobs at Gainsight who might not have gotten an opportunity in the past? And what have you really learned over the last year as a CEO?
Yeah, totally. And by the way, we have so much more we need to do than we've done. So I would say we wouldn't declare any kind of victory on any of this stuff. I think we got lucky early on at Gainsight that we had some really talented women early on in the company. And so from a gender balance perspective, we've been, pretty good. And I think we can continue to get better. But from leadership is roughly 55-45 men versus women. It's in that range. But there's so many more things to do, right? For example, underrepresented communities and, Black and Latinx people in the US. And there's so many other, people that, just differently abled people and military veterans. There's a million different ways you can look at this. And so there's a few things like I've learned that I have the power to do. One is really try to proactively mentor people that have a lot of talent, but maybe because they don't always fit the sort of stereotype of what a certain job might look like, they may not be raising their hand. And so I've been really fortunate that there's been some amazing people at Gainsight that have stepped into huge roles and maybe just weren't thinking about them. And so reaching out and spending time with them and just kind of, proactively saying, have you thought about doing this? Right. For example, there's a person on our team who told me, she's like, I want to be a CEO someday. I'm like, awesome, let's get you there. Right. Like that kind of thing. And by the way, a hard part of that is actually accepting that sometimes it actually means you're setting them up to potentially leave eventually. So that's an interesting real quirk, which by the way, actually hurts your stats, right? But who cares about stats? It actually helps. Like we have so many people that have come out of Gainsight, be CEOs and CMOs and all these, which is awesome. I'm so proud of it, right? So part of it's just proactively trying to spend time and help people, sort of maybe step outside their comfort zone and really take advantage of everything they could be doing. A second part is, I think, on the the funnel and all that, like the hiring process, really just pushing the envelope on how we can go look at more candidates. And it just takes small steps. So an example would be, if there's like an underrepresented person in the job that you're trying to hire for, but they're not looking, right? Somebody that's really great and happens to be from an underrepresented background, go talk to them and say, by the way, like, who would you recommend for this job? And you don't have to say, who would you recommend who's from a diverse background. Don't say that. It's just like by talking to people from diverse backgrounds, you will meet other people from diverse backgrounds. So that's something that I think we can do more of, and we've tried to do. A third thing is we at Gainsight have figured out that we have a little bit of power, that we're not just influencing our company, but all of our customers as well. And as you know, we serve this new profession called customer success management. And that's a relatively new, just last 10 years and rapidly growing profession. 2019, which is the last time the report came out, LinkedIn said it's the 6th fastest growing job in the world. And so it's this job that's growing a lot, but it was sort of recycling people from other tech companies, right? Because it's like CSMs, okay, great. You had to work in another tech company, but we know tech isn't a very diverse profession in general. And so we created this program to basically bring people from underrepresented backgrounds into customer success internships, and then ideally be hired full-time. It's called CSU. And we've had, I don't know, probably 60 or 70 companies sign on to bring these people and bring people into their organizations. And, we at Gainsight have had a lot of CSU interns that we've hired, I think probably half a dozen people full-time. And so obviously that's making our company more diverse, but more importantly, these are great people who just didn't have access, but they're going to make our company great, like independent of, what they look like or whatever. They're just awesome, but they just weren't getting the breaks. And so, it also brings our team a lot of pride and energy. And so that's another thing, is kind of how can you leverage your community? There's all kinds of other ways that shows up. By the way, you run a conference, and how diverse is your speaker group? Most people are onto that now, right? But how do you actually just use the power of your brand and your community to amplify whatever you believe in?
3 points are extremely valid. I think the last one is the one that I was going to ask you about, and you preemptively asked the question, because I think, one, you have to lead by example, but two, as an organization, you have the ability to essentially influence how other companies and customers think, and that's exactly what you're doing. I think with customer success, maybe blockchain development are the two big things that don't have a ton of people that have a ton of experience in that field,
Right.
but it's growing rapidly. And you're right. There's come a point over the last 5 to 8 years where you have a lot of professionals in customer success. And that's what I really want to tap into next, is this idea of customer success. What is it? How is it expanding?
Yep.
I know that you jumped into Gainsight. You kind of helped evangelize a lot of what's happening today in the customer success field. What's really driving your own personal field to stay in the space?
You as an individual, for me personally?
Yep.
Yeah, 3 things. Somebody, a candidate asked me this recently. I said, and I've thought about it a lot. Number one is that I believe in, I really believe in sort of not just what we do with vis-a-vis customer success, but this concept that we talk about of human first business. Gainsight, like our values and everything we do are all around this idea that there's like a different way to run companies that sort of puts the human being first, whether it's the employee or the customer or somebody in your community. And a lot of companies kind of dehumanize the people around them. They talk about employees being assets. When somebody tells you they're leaving the company, they treat them like they're dead to them. They villainize the competition, right? So this idea of human first business is something that it's not like we're flying to Mars or we're not Moderna curing, COVID, right? But you know what? If we can have a little bit of an impact on our employees, and maybe some other companies do it too, that feels good. So that's number one. And that feels like a real mission. And then number two, and by the way, in that number one, our company purpose when we wrote it out was to be living proof you can win in business while being human first. So it wasn't about customer success. It was about something larger. So that's something I believe in. Number two is I believe customer success is just getting started. And so I always tell our team, and I think about this all the time, I'm like, wait, why would you at all give up now? Because it's going to be so much bigger in the future. And can you imagine if there's other people are crossing the finish line, not us? That'd be a terrible feeling, that FOMO, right? We want to see this through. We worked really, really, really hard on this, right? And then the third one, and the third kind of motivator is the other side of, again, I always have two sides, one that might be kind of glossy and shiny and nice, and the other one's the real, which is I want to be successful. I'm still trying to, like a lot of us try to, impress our parents. For me, my parents are a big part of my life and I love them. And there's still that thing of have I done enough and have I achieved enough? And, Gainsight's had some success, but look, the amount of success happening right now in the business world is insane, right? So it's just, you whatever level you get to, there's so many more levels. So I'm incredibly thirsty, as we say at Gainsight, to do a lot more. So there's sort of part of it that's about ambition and competition. Part of it's about customer success just getting started. And part of it's about our human first purpose.
There's a couple of things I kind of want to unravel there. One is really about the customer success space and where it's trending. And the other one we'll get into about kind of how family has impacted who you are today.
Yeah.
What I want to understand really is you said that this is just a starting line. And I truly believe that any industry that's in 5 to 10 years of growth is really in the beginning. It's
Right.
fairly nascent. So where do you see it trending? Because I see customer success initially, it really was centered around the SaaS industry, and now it's expanding into other industries as well. What do you see progressing over the next maybe 5 or so years?
Yeah, I think at a macro level, the analogy I like to draw is how in the early days of the internet, and some people listening may not have been working then, but I'm old enough to have been working in the sort of late 90s, early 2000s. A lot of companies created what people called like the internet division of the company, right? And so that division's job was to go figure out the internet and like maybe build an app or a website or whatever, right? And obviously they did that. But today, like for most companies, if they had an internet division, that would seem very quaint. Like everyone works on the internet. Like that's just the way we work. And so I think customer success will go through a similar evolution where it goes from this sort of individual department as the pioneers to then really reshaping a whole company, right? And reshaping the company around the customer, reshaping how you do product development and sales and marketing. And so there's a big opportunity to help companies reshape around the customer. And that opportunity is so much bigger than just like the CSM team in a company. The CSM team is the canary in the coal mine. And so we believe that over time, it's going to be like, hey, I got to rethink everything that I do, including selling. Like a good example tangibly is this move towards product-led growth, which is basically the idea that a lot of businesses, the younger ones, they build a product and it's sort of on the web and you can just try it out, right? And you try it out. And so there's not a sale per se, but once you get a certain number of users, there might be a salesperson calling in to say, hey, I noticed you have a lot of users. Now, do you want to expand our enterprise package or whatever? As that happens more and more, you're having sales reshaped, right? Sales is changing. When you look at the amount of data product people have now, when they build products, the way you do product management and engineering has changed, right? Marketing, if in a world where everyone isn't just about a lead, but you actually have a lot of existing users, marketing is going to change. And so our argument is you can kind of reinvent the entire way that kind of front office of a company works, right? Maybe the accounting and billing and all that's still the same, but the way the front office works, there's an opportunity to reinvent the whole thing.
Really well said. And I think there's just this incredible opportunity for literally every single industry to
Yeah,
provide an
that's
element
right. Every
of
industry.
white glove service to their customers. I think technology will enable that, but you have to understand how it works. And I personally have been a Gainsight user. I know the value that it brings. This is not an ad, it speaks for itself. So look, I commend you for everything you've done thus far at Gainsight. And as the community grows, as people start seeking more and more roles, what's your advice to maybe people coming out of college or a
Yeah.
few years into their career about how to maybe make that shift into customer success and why even go into the space?
Yeah, totally. It's interesting. So first of all, I think that in general, like when you're coming into your career, it's always great if you're going into something that has sort of momentum and a tailwind associated with it, right? Because you just sort of ride that. So going back to like the people that like graduated from college in the late 90s and worked on internet related stuff, they did pretty well, right? Because what happens is like by 2004, some people are just getting into the internet related stuff. And you're like, I've been doing this for 6 years and you're like the expert, right? So customer success could feel like, oh gosh, there's all these people that have been doing it for a while. But the reality is they haven't. This is all relatively new. So one piece of advice is don't feel like you're going to be way behind everyone else. People are still figuring it out. There's a chance to have kind of a first mover advantage from a career standpoint and get really, really good at it. That's point number one. Point number two is there are some companies that, of course, want people that have had a lot of experience, but there's some employers that are willing to kind of grow within. And so I think getting into a company that has a really good focus on enablement, growing, hiring people that aren't necessarily super experienced, that's the second thing. And then third thing is I think figuring out your angle and your edge. So some CSMs their angle is that they're super deep on the product, and other ones they're really good with relationships or they're really good at understanding the client's business, but really sharpening the saw. I think one thing I learned early in my career, which I really helped a lot, was, don't focus so much on what you're not good at. Like figure out what you're really good at and then just become 100 times better at it. Right. And just become like I early on figured out, okay, I decent at communications or whatever, right? And so that's what I spent time on all the time. And I just get better and you just do it more and more and you get better and people want to do it more. So what is that thing that you actually are already pretty good at versus trying to go fix a bunch of things that like seem like they're not good? Because sometimes those things that you're trying to fix are things that just don't bring you energy. So it's a bit of a losing battle, right? What brings you energy that you can really get great at?
I always say that we become what we focus on.
Yeah,
Clearly, you've spent so much time focusing on communication. It's evident why you're so good at it. Continue to expand on the things that matter to you. I think that's the biggest takeaway from what you just said.
totally.
I know a big part of who you've become, who you are today, as you talk about often, is your family. You're really, really in touch with them. They've had a tremendous impact on your life. And as you know, a big part of my practice is serving the immigrant and first gen community.
Right.
What do you think your parents have afforded you throughout your life, and how do they continue to inspire you?
Oh, everything, like I mean, look practically. I mean, how do you, they give you your genetics and they give you your upbringing. And so I'm very lucky that my parents were never rich, but they were, middle class. So we had a good lifestyle. We lived in a public school, a school district with a good public school. And, so much, right. So much privilege and, being around tech, like my dad's companies were never big, but we had computers at home and was able to program and learn and be into this stuff early. Right. Which is great. But I think one of the biggest things that they gave me was, which by the way, all these things have like two sides to them, was a bit of a hunger to like achieve, and I know that's something that's kind of amongst immigrant families. It's probably not universal, but there's probably some commonality to it. And, there's good and bad. Like sometimes I definitely have that demon of like, oh, you never have done enough. Like I haven't done enough. But there's a level of striving that they gave me both directly and indirectly, which I carry to this day, and I think is a big advantage, for me. And whether it's even an advantage or not, it just is who I am, So one of the things that over time I've kind of gotten comfort with is less judging like the things that I do, like hey, yeah, I'm competitive, I want to win, I probably should just be happy with what I have. I don't judge myself like that anymore. Like it's just like, oh yeah, it's so, and I try to almost laugh at myself in a loving way, like, oh, that's so funny, Nick. You're going to see that that list, that company that just went public is worth $100 billion, and you're going to go kind of stew for the next 24 hours on why your company's not there yet, right? And be able to laugh at it, but not judge it. Like I don't want to change. I just am who I am. And so I think my parents gave me some of those seeds, and then I think what happened was over time, I then through personal development and actually coaching and other things, I ended up getting to the point where I felt comfortable with who I am and not stop trying to change it. So.
Love that. That's a perfect segue straight into our hot seat, because
Right.
you've done such a great job kind of articulating everything that you've done at Gainsight, how you think about leadership, the impact that customer success will have on the space. But we're going to throw some fire questions at you right now. So I got to ask you, are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's go. I'm psyched.
All right, Nick. So imagine you and I hop on a jet plane. We go to New York City. We drive up to Times Square, and I literally give you an unlimited budget to smother anything you want across all of Times Square. What would the message be that you share with the world?
That's a good one. Here's the first thing that went through my head is Go Steelers. So that may not be the spirit of your question, but that's the first one. I would say that just because it is what we're trying to espouse, I would say human first.
Beautiful. I love that. If you were not the CEO of Gainsight today, what would be an interest of choice for you in terms of an industry that you would go pursue today?
I mean, I haven't. So there's other business stuff I would do, but the most kind of radically different is there is part of me that sort of was this like alternate life path of like science and academia and all that. And so it would actually, I'm surprisingly nerdily into like physics and like philosophy. So something in the like philosophy of science and understanding reality, being a professor somewhere, that's probably what I'd be doing.
Beautiful. And last question for you, I got to ask this of everyone, is if you had to read one book for the rest of time, what would that book be?
That's easy, but it's super nerdy. It's it's Gödel, Escher, Bach, which is a book that is about the combat. It says Gödel, Escher, Bach. So Gödel is one of the most famous logician of all time in kind of math, theory. And Escher is MC Escher, who did these like paintings a lot of people have seen that are sort of these really weird paintings where they kind of are recursive. And then Bach is obviously Johann Sebastian Bach. And those three artists, those three kind of great thinkers have a commonality, which is all of their work is recursive. So it's a thing that like builds on itself. And Gödel Bach is all about recursion and how it might be the reason that we have conscious experience. So amongst the super nerdy computer science crowd, it's actually a pretty popular book. And amongst the average person, they don't want to read an 800-page book with math proofs in it, but it's actually really good.
I'm genuinely surprised it's not a business book. So I will
There
have
you
to
go.
add that to my own list. Look, Nick, I really appreciate you taking the time today. And as always, I want to make sure that people know where to find you on the internet and what's the best way to connect with you.
Isn't it impossible to not find me? Even if you don't want to, you just pop up right on your feed. Twitter, NRMEHTA, and then LinkedIn. Feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for all of that insight and knowledge today and for everything you're doing across the customer success community and for the underrepresented community. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. And as we always say at Career Meets World, go unleash your wildest potential. Thanks so much, Nick.
Love it. Thank you.
All right.